This week, I was at an event at my church with my kids. It was kind of a little VBS sort of thing. And I was approached 3 separate times by 3 separate women because they wanted to ask me about homeschooling. They knew that I homeschooled and they are considering it in their future, maybe not this year, but maybe the year after, something like that. They just kind of wanted to talk about it. They wanted to hear about what I do and share their fears. And I don't know about you, but over the years, even though I've been homeschooling now for 6 years, something like that, I am actually less and less confident with talking about homeschooling to people just in my general real life. I know that I have a unique ability to say the exact wrong thing that might convince them not to homeschool. And so I said to each of them, let me think about it. Let me kind of think about where I would start if I were you, what I would read, what I would focus on. And so that's what this video is really about, because I have actually been just trying to think of some ideas for my friends at church on a way to encourage them and to kind of take away some of those fears that they might have about homeschooling. And also try to not scare them because I'm making it sound way too overcomplicated and laborious. If you don't mind, I was hoping that I could test this out on you. And you could leave a comment down below on if I definitely shouldn't say something, what you might say if you were in my situation. Hopefully, maybe even something in the comments will be the best thing that I should say. So anyway, these are the things that I was thinking about telling the ladies at church about what I would do if I was starting homeschooling. And all of these moms would have kids that they start homeschooling who have already been in school. So that's different than what my experience has been, because my son and daughter have never actually gone to a school at all or a daycare or anything like that. And theirs have. So there is going to be kind of like that learning curve of we're not in this school organization anymore. Here's kind of what I'm thinking. First of all, they all just had various fears. Like one was just thinking, I don't think that my kids are going to get along with each other, or I think that there's just going to be fighting all day long. Another mom was kind of afraid of not understanding how to have little kids while you are trying to teach older kids and how that was all going to work. But honestly, I don't know. Sometimes, usually when I hear these fears, that makes sense why that would be a fear. But ultimately, what I think is probably the biggest fear is just the fear of failure. You know, you don't want to make this drastic step and then it turns out to be a nightmare or a huge mistake, and you're kind of feeling like you're gambling with your kids' education or looking silly or just whatever. I think that that's probably ultimately what the fear is. I don't really know how to make anybody feel better about that, other than to say that nobody loves your kids more than you do. You know, the teachers at school don't love your kids more than you do. So you have the most interest in making sure that their education is a good one. So I don't think that you do need to fear about failure, because you have so much more of a desire for them to have a good education than anyone else in the world. You know, they're your children that were given to you by God. Just have some confidence in that. And I think where I would start with the specifics of homeschooling is to start simple. I mean, truly start with the essential pieces of education. After the Bible, of course, there are reading, writing, arithmetic. Focus on those things. I do have a resource that I looked at this resource before I knew about Charlotte Mason or classical education or anything like that. So this is just purely an educational resource that I really appreciated. It's by one of my favorite authors, Samuel Blumenfeld. It's How to Tutor, because honestly, if you think about homeschooling, it's really more of a tutoring situation than a school situation. And tutoring is great because it's a one-on-one relationship. You're really going at the pace of the student. You're really just trying to get them to improve at whatever level they are at. And so this How to Tutor is truly just the main ingredients of just your standard education. So he gives tips on teaching a student how to read. He gives tips on teaching a student how to write. But I mean, truly with tutoring lessons that you could give, like half of this book are exercises that you can do. And so I really love that. It's almost like a textbook for wanting to be a tutor. So learning how to tutor, learning how to teach people how to write, learning how to teach a student starting with beginning arithmetic and then going all the way up through long division and things like that. It just goes through this process. You could get something like this book and almost nothing else if you are just getting started, especially with younger students, and you just want to focus on improving their reading, improving their writing, and improving their math. And we're starting there. And obviously, this is not a full curriculum, but it gives you some little tips and things to do on how you can improve your tutoring relationship with somebody. I really think that your first year homeschooling, especially if you have pulled them out of a school, should really just be focused on improving, learning how to do this homeschooling thing together in the most peaceful way possible. Peace should be the ultimate goal. I really think that homeschooling brings peace to the household. It cuts out a lot of chaos, but everybody does have to be on the same page on what we're doing each day. And they do need to respect you as their teacher. So, I mean, there are no questions in our house that we're doing school today. We're getting started with what I say we're getting started with. But I mean, you get them into the habit of doing that for like a week and they're used to it. And so then if I was thinking about, okay, so specifically, what would I use for math or what would I use for reading? And okay, well, I'm just a big fan of something like Rod and Staff as a curriculum program. I think that they're kind of a no-frills curriculum, and it's a good place to at least get started. They let you look through everything on their website, and so you can kind of see if this is a good idea. I think that their math is just really amazing. It's an easy place to start because I feel like the teacher's guides are very simple, and it focuses a lot on math facts and things like that. But I'm not really wanting to recommend a specific thing that I think that you should use. I'm kind of just saying, if you're thinking about homeschooling, instead of going off on all these wild tangents on what would I do for science and what would I do for all these things, I'm like, just look at math, find a good math program that you feel like you might be comfortable with. Find a good, depending on the age of your kids, a reading list or a reading schedule. I would also just focus on, instead of a full-blown literature program, just start with some good books and start reading them out loud together and doing the little narration things. I think that narration is a huge improvement, and I think that narration after you read a passage out of a book is actually a wonderful way to fall in love with homeschooling. So this is telling the story of Charlotte Mason, written by one of her students. And so she trained young women in particular to go out and be teachers and governesses and things like that. So the story of one woman who was hired as a governess who had been trained by Charlotte Mason. Let's see, it's on page 79 in this book. They talked about there were these 3 children that she was going to be a tutor for or a governess for. They had just what you would call just a regular form of education where they read passages and then they were kind of quizzed on it and then they had tests on it and things like that. And they also hated school. They hated their lessons. It was drudgery. They didn't like it. Now, when this new governess came in who had been trained by Charlotte Mason, it says, so I'll just read to you this little passage. She introduced many surprising and welcome changes: shorter lessons, a picture study, new books, exercise books instead of slates and slate pencils and things like that. But also they said their greatest surprise was the new way of learning. She did not ask them to memorize pages or make them read half a page to themselves and then be questioned on them. Instead, she asked them to do a very difficult thing. They must listen carefully while she read to them, and then they must tell her what they had heard. And then it goes on to say they were beginning to use their whole minds as well as their memories, and their attitude to lessons began to change. Certain subjects became popular, were eagerly welcomed. Walks, too, lost their sameness as it became clear that primroses and daisies were not the only flowers to be found, nor blackbirds and robins the only birds. Even weeds and bushes were all different. And so, slowly, step by step, loveliness came into the schoolroom, both in lessons and playtime. She didn't change everything all at once, just little things like having short little lessons and just reading something and then asking the children to tell her what they heard, and not having these quizzes and tests and things like that, and then they would just forget it later. I also think that for something like science, the easiest thing to do is to just start out doing nature walks. Go out, look at trees and figure out what kinds of trees they are. Take a picture of it with your phone. Google does the work for you. You can start to learn about the trees. You can start to learn when things bloom and why things bloom in this type of soil. It really truly does just start with a single piece of information that you learn that you didn't know before. So the thing that was kind of like the first piece of nature information that my kids and I learned was how to spot a maple leaf. And so now we might not know the exact type of maple tree, but that is a maple tree. I can tell by its leaf. And it just kind of opens up this whole world to everybody. And I do kind of think that nature study is the building block for all the other sciences. So I say all that to say that if I was pulling my kids out of school for the first time, I would focus on reading, writing, arithmetic. Nature study would be a big one. Like, that's all that I would do for science. You don't need to order a science curriculum. Just start with a nature study for this year and see where that takes you. In this book, when they were talking about science and nature walks, they said that they would just let nature be the guide. There was this casualness to it that they really loved. There was a quote in there that said that to arouse wonder and admiration must be one of the teacher's principal aims. When I'm thinking, again, of being a tutor to my kids, I'm not trying to get them to pass a test or do something specific. I'm just trying to arouse curiosity and wonder in the world in any way that I can find to do that. And that can come up in so many different areas. That's why if you kind of take the Charlotte Mason approach, the one book that I would probably recommend after How to Tutor, if I was just getting involved with homeschooling for the first time, is Home Education by Charlotte Mason. There's a lot in it that you're just not going to absorb, but the parts that you do absorb will be well worth it. So, I mean, there is so much in here that I go back and look at it that I didn't pick up the first time I read through it. And I think that the earlier you read this in your child's educational journey, the better, even if you don't homeschool, because you can do a lot of the things in here in the evenings or on the weekends as well that would help to inspire wonder and curiosity with them as well. But one of the reasons why I really like this is that it gives you the philosophy of a Charlotte Mason education, which is a classical education, but it's really just to develop this whole person, who's connecting dots on their own in the world and putting together all of these different things that they're learning about, but they're not disconnected pieces of knowledge. They're kind of all pointing in the same direction, so to speak. But why I like this is because it's a good mix of philosophy and practical solutions to things. So, I have in here the actual method of Bible lessons that Charlotte Mason recommended. And so I'll just read this to you. Bible lessons should help them to realize in early days that the knowledge of God is the principal knowledge, and that therefore their Bible lessons are their chief lessons. But then underneath that it says the method of Bible lessons. So this is how you do it. The method of such lessons is very simple. Read aloud to the children a few verses covering, if possible, an episode. Read reverently, carefully, and with just expression. Then require the children to narrate what they have listened to as nearly as possible in the words of the Bible. It is curious how readily they catch the rhythm of the majestic and simple Bible English. Then talk the narrative over with them in the light of research and criticism, using a commentary or something like that. Let the teaching, moral and spiritual, reach them without much personal application. Just such a good, useful piece of information on how to do this. You can use this information even if you're not homeschooling. If you're teaching Sunday school at church, use that as your Bible lesson. Read a story out of the Bible, do some narration, look at it with a commentary, and then talk about it. But then they have that for everything. They have the philosophy on how they teach foreign languages and then exactly how to do it. So this was a really good book. It is the first in the series of home education series by Charlotte Mason. This one is the one that I would read first. It's really good for people who have little kids, but also if you're pulling your kids out of school and they might be a little bit older, this book will make you feel like you have lost ground on some things. But also, I found this useful just to fill in the blanks of my own lack of knowledge on things. So truly, you can start anywhere with the tips in this book on your kids. I don't know, maybe this is just the time of year that a lot of people are thinking about homeschooling. Those were kind of the first things that I thought of, was to really just focus on improving the basics first before you add on all this other stuff, and to really focus on peace in your house, not to be afraid of failing. Actually, I think that if you're afraid of failing, then you know that you're probably not going to fail. That is a good fear to have, That means that you care. I am curious on how you would answer the question of if you were approached by a new homeschool mom and they just wanted to pick your brain about homeschooling and if they should homeschool, what would you say and what would you definitely not say? Because that's what I'm most afraid of saying the wrong things. Like, I don't want to go off on a tangent on how great Latin is, because then that's also teaching them grammar and logic and all of these other things to somebody who is just only considering homeschool. I feel like that would be the worst thing that I could say, but also like maybe that would sound really interesting to somebody. I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too hard about this and I should just say what's on my mind and try to just have a good conversation with somebody and acknowledge the fact that the way I do homeschool isn't for everybody. So I really just do think that you should trust in God, that God has given these kids to you to raise. And I just want to pray for my friends who are considering this. So I'm super happy and grateful that people want to approach me and ask me questions. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you're having a wonderful summer, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.